creating a better day for the legends of the road with the non-slip van floors, protective interior liners, and full range of work van accessories. Trusted by major OEMs and fleets all across North America and Europe.
Fleet might be all about vehicles, but it's the people behind them who steer the real story. Welcome to Fleet Legends, an interview series focused on passing down institutional fleet knowledge, sponsored by Legend Fleet. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Fobbit's VP of Content, and today I'm sitting down with someone who's helped shape this industry in more ways than one. Mark Petersen is quite a familiar face across Fleet and a true pro with decades of lived experience. Mark, let's go ahead and get right on into this. So, every legend has an origin story. Can you tell me how you got started in our industry?
I sure can. And thanks, by the way, Lauren, for inviting me to do this. This is a real thrill. This is a real thrill for me. I officially started in Fleet in 1984. And some of my friends, they like to tease me because they said, well, the cars have wooden wheels back then. But my story in Fleet actually starts a couple of years earlier than that, because I was managing office services at my company and managing 3 offices, and 2 in New York and 1 in New Jersey at a very young age. And I was friends with the fella who was the fleet manager at my company. And, he and I used to sit and have lunch, and he'd tell me all about the things he's doing. And I'm like, well, that sounds really interesting. This sounds like something I could do. And so we had the same boss in HR. And so I went to the boss and I said, look, I want that job. And I did that 2 years before I actually got the job. And I said, I know eventually he's going to leave. Eventually he'll move on to something better, but I want that job. When he leaves, I want that job. Took 2 years, but I got it. So I started in 1984, and just there's all uphill from there. As I mentioned to you, my career really is, there are 3 parts to my career, because I was a fleet manager at 2 different companies for 11 years. And then because of layoffs, I ended up going into sales in Fleet, which was a kind of a rare thing for fleet managers back in the 90s. There were a few that had made the transition, but they didn't last very long. But I knew the companies I was going to be associated with, and so I took a shot. Moved to Colorado from New Jersey and went into sales, and also actually bought a franchise for a transport company, which my wife and I managed while I was in sales. Wow. So, and my then wife was actually a former fleet manager herself, so she knew the business somewhat. But anyway, so there were a few other jobs in sales that lasted for 19 years, and then I decided I want to go back into being a fleet manager. I ended up moving back to New Jersey, and started interviewing after I got there for a couple of different jobs, and ended up getting a job after like a 6-month interview process for the fleet I really wanted, and was being vacated by a buddy of mine. And one of the things I wanted to throw out there, because I know from listening to some of the other videos that this was something that you were really looking forward to hearing somebody say, but I actually did say this. The manager asked me, he goes to me during the interview, you've been in Fleet all these years, but the last 19 years you've been in sales. You have been outside, you've been on the road. Why on earth do you want to get back inside behind a desk again? And I looked him straight in the eye and I said, Joe, it's because I finally figured out what I want to be when I grow up. In a nutshell, I mean, that is my career. It's been, I worked for a lot of different companies. I think I've managed 7 different fleets in my career, everywhere from 400 vehicles to 8,000 vehicles, everything from consumer products to security to a pharma company. Wow. And I've worked as a solo person. I've worked as an outsourced fleet manager for an FMC. I've worked as as part of a team. I've had fleet administrators report to me over the years. It's been a terrific career, and I couldn't have picked a better choice.
I love it. I mean, we talk a lot about falling into fleet, but I mean, from even the beginning, you heard about it, you were interested in it, you pursued it. and then came back to it. That is absolutely fantastic to hear.
Yeah, my choices in life have been very deliberate.
Well, I mean, and looking back at that career between fleet management and sales and back to fleet again, there's been a lot of changes since 1984. What have been some of the most significant changes that you've seen in fleet in your career?
Well, I mean, the obvious technology is, but also government regulations. That has probably been, you think back to 1984. Seatbelts were required in cars. That was about the only regulation we had. Missions weren't such a big deal. They were there, but they weren't such a big deal. We didn't have passenger side rear view mirrors on the outside of the cars, if you can imagine that. But we also didn't have fringe benefit reporting of personal use, which is probably the single biggest change that started in, I think it was 1986. And I remember tearing my hair out about that one, sitting with our director of tax, trying to figure out, to understand the regulations, first of all, and then secondly, to figure out how on earth we were going to do this with no technology.
As I say, it's a much more manual process back then too. It wasn't plugging some things in and getting an answer.
Completely. And even just getting the information from the drivers was an ordeal.
Odometer readings that you had to track.
Yes. I mean, when I've done presentations on this for fleet managers, I say, everybody hates that end of October, beginning of November time frame because of that reason. But I tell them, I know you don't want to hear this, but you got it easy. I mean, you got your FMC doing most of the work for you anyway. We didn't have that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, that's a lot. It really did make an impact.
Yeah, definitely. So technology was definitely a part of it, but it's surprising that how much of the basics, Fleet 101, if you will, didn't change. It was, when I slid back into the fleet manager role in 2014, it was, there were a number of people who were just waiting for me to fall flat on my face. And it was actually really, really easy transition for me. And the sales aspect of my career in fleet actually helped me a lot with that, because I had already mastered the technology piece. We had fleet car files in the 80s, in the 90s. We had individual files for each one. And, by the time I got into the new job in 2013, I inherited 2 full file cabinets of fleet files, which in the couple of years I was there, I never looked at once.
Jeez.
Because I did everything on the computer. I built digital files for everything.
So, in all of that time, we know experience doesn't come easy. It's earned. Let's get into the takeaways that have really stuck with you during your career. What are some of the more important lessons that you've learned in fleet management that you really think are crucial for some of our newer entrants to learn?
Okay. Oh, there's so many. I think the most important, and I'll have a couple that I'll mention, but the most important is you're the subject matter expert in your company. So be the subject matter expert in your company. Know when you need to push back and to stand your ground, and be willing to do that. Secondly, networking. I know everybody says networking, but and I've heard a few people that have been really sincere about it, which I think is great. But we don't do. There's never enough networking. I'll give you a great example of networking, Lauren. 41 years in the business, right? Not one single job that I got in this business since I first asked for that job at my first company when I was managing office services, not a single job came out of sending out a blind application someplace. Every job I've had in all those years, and there were quite a few of them, came out of managing and leveraging my network.
And that really does matter. And I do hear that a lot in our industry. I mean, you go to these shows when you do go, and you see a lot of those same faces with a different colored shirt on. But they're still there. They're still in. And it's those connections, those people they've talked to over the years that, see and understand what's going on and see value when it's there.
Yeah. Absolutely. The other thing I'll add to the networking piece is, everybody, your fleet manager peers are great people to network with, but don't shortchange your service providers or the people that you're not doing business with. My first year in the business, I learned more from those people because I didn't have the peer connections yet. Somebody would call me up out of the blue and want to come in to see me. I said, absolutely, come in and see me. And I got my first year education was basically that, talking to my OEM reps, talking to other service providers, whether I was doing business with them or not. And it was great. And that is an attitude that I have maintained throughout my entire career. Even when I got back to being a fleet manager, if somebody called me up and I had never met them before, but they were in the area and they needed a few minutes, I would give them a few minutes, and I'd see what there was that I could learn from them. So, totally selfish reasons. But and some of those people I ended up doing business with, and some of them we just became friends.
Yeah.
So many people just don't want to take the time, and by not taking the time, you are missing out on a huge resource.
Oh, absolutely agreed. And you don't know who you may need to be able to communicate with in the future. Some of those relationships now, down the road, having that connection, being able to call somebody up and have them recognize the name that's on the phone or the email, it can go a long way towards getting a quicker response or an honest response even. I think that's really, really valuable.
Yeah.
So this is probably one of my favorite questions. It's our time to kind of hop into our little virtual time machine. If you could go back in time, what's one thing you really wish you had known when you first started out?
When I first started out, how big an impact government regulation would make on my life. How much time it would eat up.
Yeah. How much it changes.
And how little control we have over it.
Right. Oh, that's big. And then, from your perspective, are there any rookie mistakes that you've seen some of our newer fleet managers making that you'd really recommend they steer clear of?
Yeah, single sourcing. It is, and I understand the theory behind it. A lot of it's driven by procurement, and a lot of it's driven by just your corporate way of doing business. But single sourcing your vehicles, for instance, and that's what I'm mainly talking about is your vehicles. It can be a nightmare, and we've been living through that nightmare the last 5 years, between supply chain issues and just not being able to get the cars that we've needed from even OEMs that we've had long-term relationships with, much less the newer ones, or being promised vehicles and then not getting what you were promised. So, I mean, if you were in a single source environment, you would really have some problems. I have another story along those lines, if I may. Back around 2015, 16, there was a bit of a diesel debacle in our business, and the company I was working for was, by edict of the chairman, 100% diesel.
Okay.
No excuses. No, and I asked everybody, why are we doing this? This is not a wise decision. It doesn't make sense. And they would say that so-and-so, who was a CEO or chairman, said, this is the way it is. I said, but is it a policy? Do we need to follow this? And they said, absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know why I did it. I just like to be prepared for things. And I had prepared 2 sets of selectors. A lot of extra work, but I did. And so I gave my boss the diesel selector that he wanted. It was approved, and he didn't want to talk about anything else. So I kept the other one in my drawer. And then it happened. And all the bad news came out about the diesels. And now we don't have any diesels. So we've got all these vehicles on order that now we're not going to take. And we have all these cars in service that, are we breaking the law now? What's going on? And so it was a real hornet's nest of issues. So, like I said, I like to be prepared. I happened to be in a meeting giving a presentation about, it was to the CFO about our global clean air initiatives. And it got to the point on my slide where I started talking about our push for clean air and the use of diesels in our fleet. And he looked at me and just started laughing. He goes, so what are you going to do about that? And I said, as a matter of fact, I have a plan. And I turned around and handed him my selector. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, I mean, it goes back to the earlier concept of be the expert. You really need to be the expert in your position, believe in it, believe that, you understand it best, and push that out and say, hey, I know this. This is really a good idea of what we need to do. I'm prepared.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, you're the boss. You are the captain of the fleet. And I mean, you have your superiors within your organization that are trying to tell you that this is not the way it should be done. And they may have very legitimate concerns about that, but you have to understand their concerns and counter back why, even in spite of those concerns, that you should still be looking at doing it this other way. I mean, Lauren, I've had the situation too where FMCs have not agreed with the way I wanted to do things. And they would say, no, this is the way you need to do it. And I would counter back, no, you don't understand the culture of my company. This is the way we are going to do it. Whether you can do it or you can't do it or you don't want to do it, but we're doing it this way. And if you can't do it that way, then I have to find somebody that can, because this is my mandate. This is what I have to do. So a fleet manager not only has to be prepared to push back internally, but externally as well. And of course, a professional way.
Yeah, 100%. And that can be a challenge right there. I think, it really leads well into the next question. So, fleet's a balance of people, processes, technology, and you've clearly seen it all evolve over the years. Thinking about what's worked well and what practices or innovations, what have you really found to be the most effective in managing a successful fleet?
There are a lot of things, but I think for me, the basic success has been having communication internally, externally with the providers that you're doing business with, but internally with all your stakeholders, not just senior management and your direct management, but also your drivers. Yeah. One of the things that drivers can be a nuisance. But they are our customers. I mean, I've always subscribed to fleet as being is to be of service to people. And that's what I always liked about it, to be of service and to help them if there's a way to help them. Now, drivers always ask for more than they're entitled to, and that's okay. That's okay. I had a CEO asked me one time, say, because he knew the drivers were difficult. And I said, I don't mind that, because I know if the drivers are pushing me because they want more stuff, it means they must be doing a heck of a job out there on the sales force pushing to sell our products and to advocate for the company. So I'm okay with that. I'm still going to tell them no, but a driver pushing back on something doesn't bother me at all. But one of the things that I always enjoyed a great deal in my career was doing doing driver training. getting in front of those drivers the first week they're with the company. And sometimes I had to fight for that with the sales and HR and everybody, because, there's just such a limited amount of time. But they were, it's so important, and they want to meet the fleet guy or the fleet gal. I mean, I remember going at one company. In fact, it's the only time, and I'm surprised about this, it's the only time in my career I got to go to a sales meeting and had a booth set up. So I reported into procurement. Procurement had a booth set up next to me with 2 people manning it. And I had the fleet booth with just me manning it. And I said to my boss, we're probably going to need some help on the fleet booth, because I can tell you we're going to get more people than any other booth that's here. Benefits, HR, anything else. And I had a line from 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon when he relieved me because I was going to collapse.
Oh, wow.
I had a line of people, and I enjoyed every single minute of it. And again, go back to sales. The sales working booths at shows prepared me for that.
So, with a part of this, I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, technology. It has really clearly come a very long way. How do you think it's changed fleet management? And what advancements have really been the most game-changing in that process?
Communication, for sure. I mean, the email, voicemail, doing Zoom meetings or Teams meetings, and that, I think, is probably my favorite. Is my favorite part of the technology. Computers are great, and the technology that we use with our service providers, it saves a lot of time. It really does, and so I've always been in favor of all of that, especially considering the way we used to place orders back in the day. It was a pretty long, involved process, and it was not fun.
More manual.
Yeah, very, very. But sometimes it can be, technology isn't our friend all the time. The number of emails you get is just overwhelming sometimes.
I think it was Matthew Betts who I was talking with, who said if you had to put a stamp on every email you sent, people might not be as likely to send as many emails out.
Exactly. And also people aren't very thoughtful in their emails. They tend not to reread them before they send them. And so people can come across a little bit on the sharp side, shall we say.
Yeah, tone is not easy to read in a text message or an email. I think that changes communication, as you were, talking about. It can make it easier, but it can also cause its own set of challenges when people are feeling offended or reading into something perhaps more than it was just a direct, instruction or piece of information. It can cause more challenges.
Yeah, I like email from a standpoint of, a dry information sharing process, not to actually go over a way to do things or a process. An outline, fine, but this type of situation, a Zoom meeting and a Teams meeting, is infinitely more, maybe not quite as effective as sitting across a conference room table from someone, although I don't know. I wasted a lot of time sitting in those meetings too. But certainly it's my favorite part of the technology.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, as a journalist, it's been amazing to be able to get people on camera and get those face-to-face conversations versus just an email Q&A or a quote and answer. I think it's become really valuable for our storytelling as well.
Oh, I'm sure. So, yeah, being able to see a person's face, see their eyes, and read their body cues or their facial cues. Yep. Can tell you, exactly. That tells the story right there.
100%. And, you mentioned that you've had situations where you've had a team, and we know running a fleet is one thing, but leading a team through ups and downs is an entirely different challenge. What strategies have you used to build and lead a successful team?
humor is always part of my way of doing things. I like everybody that I work with, as well as myself, to have fun at what we're doing. That's a really key piece of it, and Fleet is fun. I mean, there are times where it's not, but I mean, it really is, in my mind. It's a very fun industry, which is why people stay in it so long. But of course, it's clear communication on what's expected, and then letting people do their jobs.
Yep, getting out of their way.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I'm sure someone will tell me I made mistakes. I don't remember any of them, but I'm sure someone will tell me that I made mistakes. But that's how we learn. That's how we learn everything that we do.
Yeah, mistakes are opportunities for a lesson. That's one way that I've always really looked at it. And I mean, just keeping a team motivated. I mean, you say you use humor, but keeping them motivated can be a big challenge. How do you manage to keep your team engaged and excited as much as you are about the industry?
Well, resources are part of that. Allowing your team to go to some local meetings and do their own networking, build their own network. There are other ways of networking as well. During COVID, NAFA's started this communication process using Zoom that in fact they held the whole conference that way during COVID, and out of that grew something that I have been part of for over 5 years now, which NAFA is not involved in, but we call it it's the 4 o'clock somewhere group, and there are there's a core number of people who show up every week, but it's you come in and out as you want. We invite everybody to attend. And this is a great thing. And I did this at my last job too, which I wasn't the team lead, but I did have someone working for me. And I was the oldest person on the team, the most experience on the team.
That's how we say it. Yes.
I was always saying, everybody should do this. Everybody should come to meetings like this because it doesn't take that much time, and you can pop in, hear part of the conversation, pop out if you get. I mean, many times when I was working, I would be super, super busy, but I would always have it on in the background, even though I was working while I was listening. And then if I heard something that piqued my interest, then I would just put the work aside and then get involved in the conversation. Again, this goes back to that networking, and that's a way to develop your team as well, because these are hopefully the future leaders. The one thing I can't stand is people who have people that are working for them and think that they're trying to take their job. And I'm like, yeah, that's the way it should be. I want somebody working for me who wants my job, because I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to go someplace or I'm going to retire. So I want somebody positioned that can move into that position when I leave. And I think the really good fleet managers that have staffs are lucky enough to have staffs. That's what they do.
Yeah. It was a saying I heard recently, and it was talking about leadership and hiring. And they say, if you were to rate leaders on a scale of 1 to 10, leaders that are 6s and 7s, they're hiring 4s and 5s. But leaders who are 8s and 9s, they're hiring 9s and 10s. They want the people who are even better than they are as much as possible, because that's how you get the success moving forward. It's not anything on you. You want that solid success, that push from your team.
Right. Absolutely. We're all hopefully rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, right. It's another pun. Rising tides rise all ships, and it matters though. It means a lot. Okay, we're gonna hop back into that virtual time machine for a second, because as we know, that next generation is watching. They're joining. They're coming in. They are our next generation of fleet managers. Fleet is always evolving. What advice would you give these new entrants who are just coming in or considering the fleet management industry? What advice would you give them for starting out?
Be open, communicate, read everything you can get your hands on, participate in any venue that will provide knowledge to you, even if you initially don't think it will. You'd be surprised where ideas and education come from. It's sometimes it's not what you expect, and sometimes it's from people you don't even like. That happens too. So just every opportunity is something to grasp. What's his name? Virgin Airlines. Who's the CEO? I can't think of his name offhand, but I remember his quote. He said, "If you're offered an opportunity or a job and you don't know how to do it, take it anyway and learn it." And I may be paraphrasing there a bit, but that's kind of the way I looked at Fleet. I mean, when I got the Fleet job in 1984, first person I called was my dad. And I said, "Guess what, Dad? I'm now the fleet manager for the company, and this is what I do." And he said to me, "What do you know about cars?" Because this is the kid who drilled through a block on a 62 Rambler, okay? And I said, "I don't need to be a mechanic. I don't need to do that because I got people to do that for me. I'm a good manager." And of course, that's very different considering the kind of fleet that you're running, because there are, I mean, my whole career is centered on commercial fleets, but there's an infinite number of fleet methods out there. There really are, even within commercial. But when you start getting into, upfitted vehicles, and then you get into the government side of things or utilities, I mean, some of these people literally, I have a lot of respect for them because they literally have to be engineers to do what they do.
Yeah. No, an amount of acronyms. I have been doing this for a long time, and I've sat down with some people who've made me feel like I know absolutely nothing about cars and trucks with the amount of knowledge that they have on physics and aerodynamics and everything else that goes into it. It's fascinating, but I think you're right. You can come in with fleet, finance, procurement, from nowhere, from maintenance. There's so many paths to come up into it. You don't have to really know maintenance, but you can. And I think it all will support depending on the fleet, the operation that you're looking at. And it's one of the best things is it's not just the one path to get to that goal.
Exactly.
Okay. So staying in our time machine, looking a little further down the road, what trends or challenges do you foresee for the future of fleet as we continue to move forward, as we continue to grow and evolve? And how should our fleet managers, new or veterans, prepare for this?
Okay. Government regulation is right up there, tied in with electrification and sustainability goals from corporations, which are, and now that I'm retired, I can say this, they're made up numbers. Because I don't know that they have any, I don't know that some of these goals that I have seen from corporations that have been published out there have any, they're not written in realistic terms. We will be carbon free by 2030. Okay, we're 2025 and we can't even get hybrid vehicles to help with that reduction. So how are we going to get there? We don't care. That's our goal.
Solar panels, I think, has been the solution right now. We'll put solar panels up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Electrification is a wonderful thing. And but it's not the end all answer. I mean, as far back in the 80s, we were talking about alternative fuels. And I remember going up as a representative of NAFTA with the then executive director of NAFTA to meet with Ford about I think we were talking about compressed natural gas at the time. And they basically were saying, if you guarantee that you will buy the vehicles, we will build them. But we can't guarantee we're going to buy the vehicles unless you build them. And electrification is kind of the same way, with the extra added complication of we still don't have an infrastructure.
Yeah. And that takes time, even with gasoline vehicles. It wasn't a gas station on every corner as soon as you had them. It took time to build out and support.
Right.
And yeah.
And when you look at I think in certain applications, it makes a huge amount of sense. Centralized locations where you have your own fueling facilities, or you have the capabilities of putting in your own electric stations. In a dispersed fleet, like a pharmaceutical fleet, for instance, talking about sustainability goals, you have a dispersed fleet that's and the drivers are young, and a lot of them live in apartments, and the turnover can be high. And electric vehicles may not be the best fit for these people. And I know as an industry, a lot of people, and I know I did when I was managing not just the last fleet, but other fleets, we leaned heavily on hybrid vehicles to meet some of those goals. And unfortunately, because of government regulation, the manufacturers stopped making hybrids and went completely to electrification.
And that's changing again in the news just the last few days. Some of those vehicles are now going back. Extended range is becoming a little bit more popular. And I think it goes back to your first piece, one of your first pieces of advice on single sourcing, whether it's an OEM, a fuel type, anything else. When you are stuck in just one single option and something happens, the pivot is a lot more challenging than if you had a few ways of kind of already going one way or another, or having another supplier. It can make a big impact.
Definitely. There's a lot of moving pieces fleet managers deal with.
Just a couple. Yeah. We've scratched the surface. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your journey and the valuable insights and humor that you've gained along the way. It's stories like this that just remind us that fleets, again, not just about those vehicles and the technology, it's about the people driving the change in the vehicles themselves. And so before we wrap, I want to make sure I give you the last word. Is there anything else that you want to say to the folks watching, or your fellow fleet manager and pros that are tuning in?
Yes, thank you. There actually is. Ask questions. I don't want to say question everything, but question everything. Question why we do things the way we do them. Question why your titles aren't coming through and your resale and your remarketing is taking so long. Question why, when you're told, no, we can't do that. Question why. Why can't we do that? Because you have to be educated to inform your management that certain things can't be done a certain way. Because if you're really good at what you do, your management thinks you can do everything.
Be the expert. I love it.
Yep.
Well, for everyone else, we hope you're walking away with at least a few solid takeaways and maybe a little bit of inspiration too. If you got thoughts on the episode, drop them in the comments. Someone else that you think deserves to be on this show, drop their name as well and let us know who we should see next. We've got some more great conversations coming up, so stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Fleet Legends.